Story 1. The Whistler. The front door open, slammed shut. Any moment now, Gary would either start buzzing about how well work had gone, or else he would stalk upstairs and think how best to word his complaints about his boss while he changed for supper. It was always one or the other. There seemed to be no middle ground with Gary's job. Today was a complaining day, and a bad one, by the way. Gary's feet stomped up the stairs and down the hall to the bedroom. I sighed and mentally prepared myself as I extinguished the flame beneath the stew. I had learned long ago that it was best to let Gary vent his frustrations without interruption. If he was allowed to say his piece, he would calm down quickly, and then we could carry on with our evening. I glanced up at the ceiling suddenly. Surprised, is that? Whistling. It was not angry, spiteful, melancholy, nothing like that. Just cheerful, intermittent whistling. I had been wrong, then. Gary was not frustrated. Quite the opposite. It seemed, inside, I was relieved. I knew it never had anything to do with me. But listening to Gary complaining did begin to grate on my nerves until it felt like I was the reason for all his troubles. Maybe he has some really good news, I thought to myself as I began setting the table. It certainly had to be something above and beyond a pleasant work day that put Gary in such a good mood. The phone rang as I poured the milk, startling me and sending opalescent puddles spreading across the table. Quickly throwing some napkins down to halt the expanding spill, I wiped off my hands and answered. Hello, hi honey, it's me. I'm going to be pretty late tonight. Traffic's horrible. I think there was an accident or something. I'm not sure how long it'll take to clear up, so you should probably just start eating without me. See you soon, I hope. And without giving me a chance to reply, Gary hung up. A deathly chill encased me as I turned to face the front door. I could see it was still locked. Upstairs, the whistling continued. The tune was familiar, but it was so off-key that I had trouble naming it. It went on, halting now and then for a breath, rising and falling until I could stand it no longer. I found myself inching towards the knife rack on the counter, and before I knew it I had pulled the largest blade from its place. Whoa, I thought to myself, slow down, there was an intruder in my house. My best option was to call the police. Sliding the knife back into place, I picked up the phone and began to dial 911. What answered was not the friendly, calming voice I expected. I slowly pulled the handset away from my ear and stared at it with revulsion as a series of cheerful but off-key notes came, pouring out, trilling in awful dissonance with the song from upstairs. My hand began to shake as I returned the phone to its place. My eyes turned once more to the ceiling. The sound had devolved into a senseless warbling, something that I found hard to connect with a human voice, although the melody was still vaguely familiar. My hand reached once more for the knife. I made my way timidly to the stairs, pausing as I came to the front door to make sure that it really was locked. An awful feeling of expectation trickled down the steps as I stared up into the darkness of the second-floor hallway, and I gripped my knife tighter, holding it in front of me to ward off. To ward off what? I had no idea. Taking a deep breath, I began to climb. The upstairs corridor was empty, but I could not relax. The door to the master bedroom was shut, and I eyed it warily in the knowledge that it was always left open. Listening closely, beneath the whistling, I thought I could hear footsteps on the other side, padding softly as they shuffled across the carpet. Swallowing the lump in my throat, I placed one hand on the doorknob, took a moment to calm my pounding heart, and wrenched the door open. Immediately, the whistling stopped. The master bedroom was vacant. My ears ringing with the sudden silence, I crept inside, my knife held ready. But there was no sign of anyone besides myself. Releasing a pent-up sob of fear, I collapsed on the bed. Just a second ago, there had been someone in here. I had heard them whistling. Walking back and forth, I would have sworn that I even saw a faint shadow pass underneath the door before I forced it open. Pulling myself together, I got up from the bed and made one last inspection of the room. Nothing. Had I imagined it all? Still shaking from fright, I resigned myself to the fact that the bedroom was empty, and turned to leave. A tall figure blocked the door. A frightened shriek erupted from my throat as my arm instinctively fell, burying my knife in the intruder's chest. The figure grunted it was a man and stumbled out into the hall, colliding with the far wall before collapsing onto the floor. Gingerly fingering the bleeding hole in his shirt, the man looked weakly up at me. "Gee, Gary," I stammered. His eyes slid halfway shut, his head rolled to one side, and his breath fell silent. The dripping knife dropped from my hand as I covered my mouth in shock. My husband lay dead at my feet, and as the horror began to overwhelm me, a cold draft hit the back of my neck softly, so I could barely make it out. Whistling, it passed by my ear and down the hall. Heavy, stomping footsteps as the voice moved downstairs. The front door opened, and at that moment I recognized the song, and the lyrics ran through my head. "Now we're done. It sure was fun, but thanks to you, now we're through." The door slammed shut, the whistling was extinguished, and my screams filled the air. Story 2. Demon of the Outback. I've spent a good portion of my life out in the Australian bush. Enough time that there is very little left out there that can surprise or scare me. I've tussled with massive scrubber bulls and lived to tell the tale. And I've even come across good-sized king brown snakes and funnel web spiders that would send most city people running with their tail between their legs. I've learnt not to be so arrogant about knowing the bush now. The land has proven that it still holds many secrets, most of which aren't meant to be known. It started during 2011. Right at the end of the wet season. We had only just started work again, seeing as flooding and dangerous conditions made most work too risky. There was enough grass and water for the cattle, so it wasn't a concern other than to worrying about how much stock we lost to the flood water. The first thing that indicated that something was wrong was rather innocuous. We started finding dead cattle in the paddocks. We didn't think much of it at the time, merely hauled the carcasses away the minute we could get to them. Young stock die all the time after all, whether it was snakes or feral dogs or even just exposure to the elements. We weren't sure. We just assumed it was nothing and continued with our jobs. Then a pair of horses died, along with one of the cattle dogs. A snake bite could have explained it. After all, there are multiple poisonous reptiles in the outback, but it was the way we found the carcasses that made us scratch our heads. They'd been torn apart. Feral dogs didn't come near the house where we kept the dogs and horses. Even those with a lot of dingo blood in their veins were wary of humans. But what else could it have been? Australia isn't one for large land predators. It soon became nothing but campfire talk, however, as weeks passed without any more signs of the elusive predator. We were starting to get into mustering season, and as such had hired a few farm hands and jackaroos to help with the cattle and didn't have time for idle conversation. It was on one of these musters that the creature struck. Again, not a cow or a horse this time, but one of the jackaroos. He went galloping into the scrub to chase out a few stray steers, and although the cattle came racing out to join the mob that was starting to form, he and his horse didn't. We searched for him, but never found any sign of him. People were starting to grow worried about whatever was that lurked in the darkness. We were far from civilization with nothing but our horses and saddlebags on us. We heard the feral dogs howling that night. There were a fair few on the station, most with a strain of dingo in them. Pure dingoes were rare now on the mainland, but all of us slept with a gun in our hands. We doubted it was a dingo that was causing all the trouble, but what else could it have been? One of the men with us seemed extremely anxious. He was Aboriginal in origin and had been raised on the native folklore of bunyips and demon dingoes, which he relayed to us over the fire. We laughed it off, of course. Native stories have always been treated that way, unfortunately. Either way, he wanted us to head straight back to the house, which was still a few days' travel from us. The following day was silent. We remarked on it as we rode, for such silence was unusual in the bush. There were always cockatoos and other birds causing a ruckus, along with a multitude of insects. Lizards would sunbathe on red rocks and skitter away undisturbed. There was nothing at that moment. The land appeared dead. The horse and cattle seemed skittish, tossing their heads as the whites of their eyes showed. One large bull took off from the mob, racing into the undergrowth with a bellow. As I was the one closest to it, I was the one who had to take off after it. I moved warily, not scared of the predator, who seemed to be stalking us, but of the bull itself. They were dangerous when cornered, after all. I wasn't the only one. After the bull, I soon learned, as a dingo raced free from the undergrowth and bowled into the bovine. I'd never even seen a pack of feral dogs take down a bull in the prime of its life, but here was a single canet doing so without any trouble. It was obviously a dingo. No dog could ever come close to having the same presence as the rust-colored wild dog that was native to Australia. It was massive, though, more than twice the size of a normal dingo, and its eyes, it looked up when the bull fell limp, eyes the red of the desert sand and burning with the strength of a flame. Its teeth were blooded as it bared them at me, stalking forward with its tail raised. I was frozen, staring at the monstrous dingo in shock. Thankfully my horse was less so, and with a panic whinny my mount turned and galloped as if demons were at its heels. I could hear the dingo snarling behind me, but didn't glance back until I was free from the scrub and at risk of outpacing the men I worked with. The scrub was still as dead as a grave. Whatever that thing, for it can't have been a dingo. No dingo looked like that thing had given up the chase. I never spoke of what happened that day, no matter how many questions people ply me with. I also refused to look at the rock art on our property, the ochre pigments worn with age. The yellow was faded, but the shape was still distinguishable. It appeared that it had been wrong of me to ignore the native tales. The rocks prove that with an age-old painting of a massive dingo with ruby eyes. Story 3. Tapping. Tapping. I could hear tapping. My eyes drifted to the faint glow of my alarm clock. For 42 a.m. I knew I'd be up in only an hour, so I closed my eyes again. What had woken me in the first place tapped loudly once more. louder than the first few. My heart pounded in my chest. I was wide awake now, but too fearful to move. Maybe it was Mittens, I told myself. I really did want to believe it was my cat, but she still remained at the edge of my bed. She stared at me with her large green eyes and meowed. She didn't seem bothered by the noise at all, and she'd been a skittish cat as long as I'd known her. Obviously, it had to have been my imagination. I gave up on sleep and stood on my hardwood floor, walked to my computer to retrieve my house shoes from the desk, then stopped. The tapping started again, with a few scratches and scraping that almost made it sound like broken Morse code. Tap, 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 scratch, tap, tap. I turned, wondering if Mittens had followed me and managed to make the sudden noises. But no, Mittens was gone. My closet door had been open just a crack, just enough for Mittens to have gone inside. I guess I left it open before I slept. I flipped the light switch on my way to the closet. Just as I reached for the doorknob, something soft brushed across the back of my leg. I nearly screamed. It had startled me so badly, and I stumbled backwards onto the floor. I stared at my beds. Underneath, staring into a pair of playful green eyes that shone white in the light. I didn't expect to see Mitten's whole body, seeing as she was a black cat with a name fitting for her white paws. I chuckled nervously, my heartbeat still pounding in my ears, and crawled towards the bed. I said her name, hoping to lure her out without reaching under the bed, knowing the skittish cat would most likely scratch me out of fear. The eyes blinked, and I heard her meow. It had come from behind me. I twisted around to see what was behind me. Sitting up on my knees, my cat purred and flicked my back with her tail, meowing again. The realization struck me hard, so hard that I faced forward while falling backwards again, catching myself just in time on my hands. Mittens jumped away from me. At the sudden movement, I saw her flee to my desk, but I hardly noticed at the time. I was too focused on the bed. The eyes had gone. In one quick motion, I stood and practically dived for the door, turning the knob and only opening it a little before my closet door slammed behind me. I froze, afraid to turn towards the sound. I heard Mittens scramble through the bedroom door's crack. I listened in horror. Something began to furiously tap the closet's interior with its occasional scratching. It even went so far as to pound on the door a few times before scratching and tapping. I still don't know how long I had stood at the door listening before I snatched my phone and left the room to call the police. From what I remember, they found nothing but Mittens hiding at the top of the fridge. I'd still gone to work that morning. On my way back home, I decided to stop by the store and buy a frozen pizza and ice cream, as well as some wine if the tapping started. Again, my brother had given me a movie to watch before all that happened, a comedy. Just the night before that thing came into my home. I checked the closet the instant I came home, relieved to find it still closed, and I left the bedroom. I've never been so grateful to have an old home with locks outside of the room's doors, being able to lock that creature where it resides. The movie started, and Mittens had already curled up next to me and fallen asleep. About halfway through the movie, my laughter was interrupted. I nearly dropped my spoonful of ice cream onto the floor at the sound of tapping. I ignored it and gulped down some of the wine, waiting for it to stop. It eventually did, followed by the sound of a closing door. I slept on the couch that night with mittens and fell into a drunken slumber that had only been last night. When I'd awoken only an hour ago, I felt a very warm hand wrap around my ankle that had dangled off of the couch. Before I could react, I felt sharp teeth sink into the back of my ankle that seemed to come from the hand, and I kicked the thing away with a scream. Within the few seconds I stayed, I now realized that black fur had been scattered around me and stuck to me, matted together with what might have been blood. I didn't notice before because I just ran without any hesitation. I'm hiding in my closet now. I don't know where Mittens is, and I don't want to know. My phone is on the coffee table where I'd left it last night. I can hardly stand on the ankle the creature bit, and I can feel it swelling painfully. It almost feels infected with something. What's bothering me now is that it's scratching and tapping on the door as I speak. They're getting faster and harder. It's frightening me that I'm stuck in here having to hear it. It just might drive me insane. What frightens me most isn't the thing outside of the closet. What scares me most, what makes my heart skip a beat and makes my hands shake uncontrollably, is what is carved into the inside of the closet door. Behind you, I just turned to see what had been carved onto the wall on my right. I've never wanted to scream more in my life. Next to you, I immediately faced the closet door again. But it's not just the words etched into the wall that's bugging me as much as it should. What scares me is that I can hear tapping behind me now. Story for the soft nowhere. Hi, I'm Caitlin, and I'm 11 years old, I think. I may have been here for 10 minutes or 10 years. Every second in this place feels very long. Who I am isn't really important. But if you must know, I'm a girl who loved school, cartoons, and pop music. I'm floating in a big black emptiness. I can see my parents and friends in the distance. I want to be with them. They probably want to be with me, but I can't reach them, and they can't reach me. We're all stuck in this big black place, and we're all floating and unable to move. I think everyone from Earth is here. There are probably all the celebrities, religious people, policemen, teachers, and everyone. But none of us can move or interact. It reminds me of purgatory, which I learned about in Sunday school. It's supposed to be like this, only everyone is here instead of just the unbaptized babies and occasional sinners. I always imagine purgatory being scarier than hell anyway. At least in hell, you can hear your loved ones scream beside you, and the pain is physical. With this place, and I guess purgatory as well, you're paralyzed and trapped in your own body. The darkness is kind of like a cushiony straitjacket, holding us all in place. Some might think it's beautiful. All of us are together in the same place. It blows my mind to think that Taylor Swift and the President of the United States are probably floating here with me. Nobody is too good for the end of the world. I should say how this all started. It was going on New Year's Eve, and everything was kind of scary. Everyone expected the world to end, but I don't know exactly why. Something to do with global warming or space on the news. They talk about more and more people disappearing. Large holes leading to nothing started appearing all over the ground. In some spots, it was hard to avoid falling into them. The nights were pure blackness. Even out in the country where my family lived, there were no stars, and there had always been stars before. Towards the end of December, the sky was just as black during the day as it had been at night. It was like a light bulb that was on its last legs and finally went out. The crazy stuff happening was all anyone talked about. The boys tried to scare me and my friends at school, telling us the Martians were clearing the sky to come get us. I didn't believe them, but I was still just as scared about the unknown situation as everyone else. One day after school, I overheard my teachers discussing how to educate us on what was happening, but they were just as clueless as their students. Mr. Jameson said they may as well tell us kids that we're all fucked. I couldn't take it when I heard him say that. I ran into the classroom crying. They comforted me and told me everything would be all right. But how could I believe them? My parents told me that the people in charge would figure things out, but I didn't believe them either. The same went for one of my favorite TV shows, which had a message at the end of an episode telling us to be brave and that everything would be okay. I was disillusioned. Nothing was okay. Everyone on the news seemed scared and baffled, too. It was all supposed to come down at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve. My parents told me there'd been some similar scare about 15 years ago with something called Y2K. Y2K turned out to be a hoax, but there were no signs that it would happen. The thing we were dealing with now had warnings, and they were scary, like nothing anyone had seen before. On New Year's Eve, my family all huddled in our living room. We spent most of the night hugging and saying how much we loved each other. I could barely keep from crying the entire time. I mostly remember my dog, Bella, looking at me really sadly. Dogs always look sad, but she almost looked ready to cry herself. It was like she knew what would happen, and she wanted to tell us she loved us and would miss us. If I could cry in this place where I am now, I would bawl like a baby just thinking about that night. I wonder if Bella is here, but it really doesn't matter. At midnight, everything went black. I heard my mother scream. My entire body went numb. My tongue felt like a sock. My limbs all went limp. I was still awake through all of it. After what felt like forever, I could see again. My parents were floating off in the distance, and I was in my place. The terror was still there, but there was no way of expressing it. I'm not scared anymore, just sad and hopeless. I've called this place the soft nowhere because everything feels so neutral and pillowy, but pointless. I can only hope that one day everything will go back to normal, but I know it won't. This is our life now. We are strung amongst the blackness, unmoving, just as the stars had been. Everyone is equal. Nothing matters anymore. There is still one thing that gives me hope, though. From the corner of my left eye, I can just make out some kind of light. My greatest wish is that it's some sort of salvation. It's the only thing holding my mind together, other than the knowledge that my family loves me and I love them. Love isn't visual, though, especially here. It's not something you can hold or show. The only thing this place is good for is displaying humans. I wish I could tell everyone to try moving. It feels so impossible. But I think that maybe if we all try it, this place couldn't take it. There's no way of telling people to move, but I'll keep trying. Hell, if I could, I'd be writing this down rather than reciting it in my mind. For now, I guess we all have each other. Anyway, Story 5, 1 hour. Today was perfectly normal to begin with. Nothing out of the ordinary at all. The same old droning of daytime television and cars. The occasional bird just loud enough in the backyard to make itself heard over the top of the sounds that surround most any town-based home. However, As the day progressed, a steady silence has fallen. But it's not a normal silence, not by any stretch of the imagination. If it weren't for the now overwhelmingly loud taps of my keyboard, I'd think I was literally deaf. It started around noon today, when the cars began to sound muffled as they went past. At first I passed it off as just being quieter engines. I'm certainly not a genius when it comes to cars, so I couldn't tell you a thing about them except color. Shrugging this off, I'd carried on watching the television until my usual programs were done, at which point I turned it off as usual. Nothing. All sound gone. It was as if when I hit the power button on my remote, I'd hit mute on the entire world. No wind, no birds, no people, no cars, nothing. I can't even hear the hum of my fridge anymore, or even that ringing that everyone gets when locked in the normal silence that comes with the night. I know, though, that it wasn't the television at all, though it may as well have been. You see, through my programs things had gradually stopped. First the cars, then the wind, followed by the birds chirping less and less until all birdsong came to a halt, then the people in the distance, and my electronics, until finally the TV screen was black to refusing to allow itself to be turned back on. I've never heard a silence like this before. I think what made it worse was that it wasn't just a lack of sound, but a lack of movement, as if the entire world had been put on pause. Finding the silence too much, you see, I'd wanted to get towards the sound again, and I was in need of a few groceries at any rate, so I'd grabbed my wallet and my coat and left. By the time I'd reached the end of my street, though, something stopped me, as if there was an invisible barrier of unbreakable cotton walling. I just couldn't go any further. I wanted to, but I couldn't get my feet to move any further, and so I stopped, listening for anything at all. Just a single sign that I wasn't alone in this world was to no avail, though. Even the other houses of my street were silent. Out of curiosity and desperation by now, I'd begun to pause at each gate as I made my way back towards my house in defeat, looking through windows to see movement or to see people. But there was nothing, as if all houses had been abandoned. In that single moment, though, I thought that both my prayers and my nightmares had come true, when I turned only to be greeted with the chest of a stranger. I'm sorry. I didn't hear you coming," I had said in a quick, panicked voice, stepping back to gain distance between us. It was then that it occurred to me that he was a little bit tall, even by stretched standards. I myself stand at 6.5 feet tall, so for my head to only reach midway up his chest, you can imagine the height I speak of. He didn't talk, though, not even an audible breath. He just stood there, staring down at me. At first glance, aside from his height, there was nothing odd about this man. Nothing odd at all. But when you're locked in silence, staring at a stranger, you tend to notice just the smallest of things, like the way his eyes didn't seem to hold that spark of life that a living being's did, or how his hair almost seemed to be made of tiny threads of silk rather than actually being hair, or how his suit was covered in little patches of dirt and dried stains of a darker shade than the near black of the cotton. I could swear to you here and now that I'd been looking at this man for hours in our silence and believe it myself. But that wouldn't be possible. You see, at that moment, as I'd noticed the texture of his skin seemed more like a soft leather than real skin, he'd stepped aside, not even casting another glance to me, walking off down the street, boot-clad feet leaving not even the faintest of sounds in their wake. I stared after him until he'd left the corner of my street. I could have screamed. Oh, how I wanted to scream. Something about that man had left me with a tangled lump in my throat, left me trembling and oh so alone. It wasn't until he'd gone that I realized just how terrified I'd been. I've never been so scared in my life, and I pray that I never will be again. I'm typing this now to get out a message. I'm hoping that somehow you can believe me. If you ever find yourself in the same silence as I described to you, don't move, sit there, stay where you are, don't even blink if you can help it. I don't know what that man did to me, but I can feel it now, something pulling at my mind, this horrible tug, as if my mind is about to be swallowed whole by the sounds as they're coming. Back now, I hear my clock ticking again. Just an hour, the same as when I first glanced it. Just an hour, I hear them. The breeze against the sycamore in my backyard. The birds in the distance. Whispers of engines from miles away. One by one they're coming back. They're so loud I want the silence. Story 6, the Dyatlov Pass incident. The Dyatlov Pass accident refers to an incident that resulted in the death of 9 ski hikers in the northern Ural Mountains. The incident happened on the night of February 2nd, 1959, on the east shoulder of the mountain Kholat Syakhl A. Mansi name, meaning Mountain of the Dead. The mountain pass where the accident occurred has been named Dyatlov Pass after the group's leader, Igor Dyatlov. The mysterious circumstances of the hikers' deaths have inspired much speculation. Investigations of the deaths suggest that the hikers tore open their tent from within, departing barefoot in heavy snow. While the corpses show no signs of struggle, one victim had a fractured skull, two had broken ribs, and one was missing her tongue. The victim's clothing contained high levels of radiation. Soviet investigators determined only that a compelling unknown force had caused the deaths, barring entry to the area for years thereafter. The causes of the accident remain unclear. It had been agreed beforehand that Dyatlov would send a telegraph to their sports club as soon as the group returned to Vitsai. It was expected that this would happen no later than February 12th, but when this date had passed and no messages had been received, there was no reaction. Delays of a few days were common in such expeditions. Only after the relatives of the travelers demanded a rescue operation did the head of the institute send the first rescue groups, consisting of volunteer students and teachers, on February 20th. Later, the Army and police forces became involved, with planes and helicopters being ordered to join the rescue operation. On February 26th, the searchers found the abandoned camp on Kholat Syakhl. The tent was badly damaged. A chain of footsteps could be followed leading down towards the edge of nearby woods on the opposite side of the pass, 1.5 kilometers northeast. But after 500 meters they were covered with snow. At the forest edge, under a large old pine, the searchers found the remains of a fire, along with the first two dead bodies, those of Krivonishenko and Doroshenko, shoeless and dressed only in their underwear. Between the pine and the camp the searchers found 3 more corpses, Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin, who seemed to have died in poses suggesting that they were attempting to return to the camp. They were found separately at distances of 300, 480, and 630 meters from the pine tree. Searching for the remaining travelers took more than 2 months. They were finally found on May 4th under for meters of snow, and a stream valley further into the wood from the pine tree. An examination of the four bodies which were found and may change the picture. 3 of them had fatal injuries. The body of the Bobrignol had major skull damage, and both Dubonina and Zolotarev had major chest fractures. The force required to cause such damage would have been extremely high, with one expert comparing it to the force of a car crash. Notably, the bodies had no external wounds, as if they were crippled by a high level of pressure. One woman was found to be missing her tongue. There had initially been some speculation that the indigenous Mansi people may have attacked and murdered the group for encroaching upon their lands, but investigation indicated that the nature of their deaths did not support this thesis. The hikers' footprints alone were visible, and they showed no sign of hand-to-hand struggle. There was evidence that the team was forced to leave the camp during the night as they were sleeping, though the temperature was very low, around -25 to -30 degrees Celsius. With a storm blowing, the dead were dressed only partially, and certainly inadequately for the conditions. Some of them had only one shoe, while others had no shoes or wore only socks. Some were found wrapped in snips of ripped clothes, which seemed to be cut from those who were already dead. Journalists reporting on the available parts of the inquest files claim that it states 6 of the group members died of hypothermia and 3 of fatal injuries. There were no indications of other people nearby apart from the 9 travelers. On Kholat Syakhl, nor anyone in the surrounding areas, the tent had been ripped open from within. The victims had died 6 to 8 hours after their last meal. Traces from the camp showed that all group members, including those who were found injured, left the camp of their own accord, by foot. One doctor investigating the case suggested that the fatal injuries of the 3 bodies could not have been caused by another human being, owing to the extreme force to which they had been subjected. Forensic radiation tests had shown high doses of radioactive contamination on the clothes of a few victims. The final verdict was that the group members all died because of an unknown compelling force. The inquest ceased officially in May 1959 due to the absence of a guilty party. The files were sent to a secret archive, and the photocopies of the case became available only in the 1990s, with some parts missing. Some researchers point out the following facts which were missed, perhaps ignored by officials. After the funerals, relatives of the deceased claimed that the skin of the victims had a strange orange tan. A former investigating officer said in a private interview that his dosimeter had shown a high radiation level on Kholat Syakhl, and that this was the reason for the radiation found on the bodies. However, the source of the contamination was not found. Another group of hikers about 50 kilometers south of the accident reported that they saw strange orange spheres in the night sky to the north, likely the direction of Kholat Syakhl at the same date as the accident happened. Similar spheres were observed in Ivdel and adjacent areas continually during the period of February to March 1959 by various independent witnesses, including the Meteorology Service and the military. Some reconstructions of the victims' behavior suggest that they were blinded. The rescue team had seen that the victims broke damp and thick pine branches for the fire, even though there was good dry brushwood around. Some reports suggested that much scrap metal was located in the area, leading to speculation that the military had utilized the area secretly and might be engaged in a cover-up. Story 7, The Company. We are all too familiar with creepy basements. We all know the feeling you get when you turn the lights off before running up the stairs, praying nothing will grab your ankle before the last step. As children, we would dread trips to the cellar, the cold room, and that cramped, dusty smelling spot under the stairs when we would have to retrieve that old box of Christmas decorations. No, creepy does not cut it. Words like disturbing, freakish, and hair-raisingly avoidable come to mind. For me, however, there was one shining diamond that stood out against the endlessly black coal. Our newly renovated bathroom. This safe hole pleasantly contrasted the cracked cement floors, dark, musty-smelling crawl spaces, and spiders the size of mice, whom you could find in every corner, and, if you were lucky, crawling up your sock. I would descend a creaking staircase, carpeted with short, mold-ridden shag, and a stairway immune to daylight, scurry past a hole in the wall that seemed fit for a grabby hand, and finally step into the serene safety of the bathroom. Here I would shower, morning after morning. Here I would be protected by the solid oak door, the only remaining piece of the old bathroom, and the only part of the basement that filled me with feelings other than unease. Naturally, this was the last piece to be taken out. This was the one thing that was not like the others, and this one thing had to go, according to my parents anyway, for precisely one day, meaning one night, one morning, one shower of which the trustworthy door would not serve as my protector. The door would be gone. I would have to wait while the new door was whisked, and this day is one I will hardly miss. The thought of this one day will later be the reason I decide to go to bed early or keep the light on while I sleep, or more likely, don't sleep. I twist the knob, allowing an initial burst of frigid water to spit forth. A few seconds later, calming warmth follows. This shower is just like all the others, or so I tell myself. I step in and slide the frosted glass door shut. I peer through the warped, glossy objects on the other side, morphed into entropy. With the door to the bathroom removed, I can see into my laundry room. I move side to side, and it looks like thousands of tiny creatures squirming around in the darkness, all of them knowing now is the time to strike. There is a certain feeling that engulfs one's body when they suspect there is another presence amongst them, and one of which they would rather not alert the attention of. It is somewhat akin to the feeling of standing on a freshly frozen pond. Then you hear the ice crack. You don't move. You try not to breathe. Currently, this is me. I fully step into the falling stream of heat. I shiver as my body warms up, but whence, as my frozen toes burn, I squirt some shampoo into my hand, work it into my hair. I wet my head under the water, then turn back quickly to the door to make sure nothing has changed. Closing my eyes is inevitable. I shut them and stick my head under the water, rinsing furiously so I can open them again. With just my first senses against my fears, I begin to panic. It is then the blissful current of warmth changes to an icy blast. My back arches away from it. My mouth instinctively opens to let out a small gasp. I turn quickly and stick my hand out into the stream, half protecting myself, half waiting for the heat to return. I'm still waiting. Still, I scold. I would have reached out and twisted the knob further to the left. I would have then waited and been rewarded with the return of heated water. This all would have happened were there not already a hand there. I immediately open my eyes after what seems like every muscle in my body trying to burst through my skin. Following this is the stinging. All the suds pooling in my eyes send bolts of lightning coursing through my face. I need to open my eyes but can't. There is a certain feeling one gets when they know they are in danger, but are deprived of their senses. It's the feeling you get when you wake up in the middle of the night from a strange noise and try to find the light switch. You slide your feet off the edge of the bed and tiptoe toward your door in pitch blackness. Getting the lights on is your only thought. For some reason, the switch eludes you. Your hand frantically searches the walls, your heart beating into your eardrums as you turn in panicked circles. Currently, this is me. This is all too much for my mind. I'm quivering as I shrink to the floor of the shower, that feeling of spiders crawling over my body as I wait for something to touch my wet, exposed skin. My eyes still burning, I cup some water in my hands from the running stream of ice. I splash it in my eyes, doing my best to open them at the same time. I blink a couple of times with my face pointing down. I muster all my courage to look to the knob. In the cold shower of water, droplets fall and explode into mist off my head as I turn to see the hand is gone. I feel some warm life come back into my body. I was almost convinced I had imagined the whole thing. I would have stood up and finished my shower in the confidence of a warm flow of water and my newly sound senses. This all would have happened if a cold wind had not blown in and cooled the already frigid layer of moisture on my skin, sending a shiver through my spine and down my arms. I would have been so reassured if that thing would have just remembered to close the sliding door. Bonus stories. Story 1. Takakanonuma, Greenland, in Japan's Fukushima Prefecture. There is an abandoned amusement park known as Takakanonuma, Greenland. It sits in the outskirts of Hobara, a section of the Japanese city of Date. Very little is known about this park, and its exact location is largely unknown. You can't find it on any Japanese map, as it simply isn't there. Supposedly, its coordinates are 3,749 feet 02, 16 and 140 30 305, 70 80. What if they are put into Google Maps? The search will be directed to the center of Hobara. This is inaccurate, since the park is hidden in a mountainous, rural area. The only major information known about Takakanonuma, Greenland, is that it opened in 1973 and closed 2 years later. Some claim that this was due to poor ticket sales and needed renovations, but locals say that it was because of a significant amount of deaths on the rides. Miraculously, the park reopened in 1986, but struggled to remain open due to increased competition from bigger parks such as Tokyo Disneyland, as well as financial trouble. Finally, in 1999, Takakanonuma, Greenland closed for good. Following its closure, the amusement park was left to rot. Photographs from urban explorers who have infiltrated the area show a massive amount of decay. The Ferris wheel and the roller coaster are covered in rust. The entrance is covered in graffiti, and the premises are being reclaimed by plants. The most notable feature of the park is the dense fog that always looms over it, giving off a Silent Hill feel. Like the information about the area, there is very little photography and video of it. Allegedly, Takakanonuma, Greenland, was demolished in 2006 and now sits as an empty lot. However, in 2007, a citizen of the United Kingdom named Bill Edwards claimed to have visited an untouched, completely intact park Supposedly, he took numerous pictures that were identical to those taken before the park's supposed demolition, showing the same rusty, forgotten rides. However, according rumor, when uploading these photos, only one appeared on his computer. This picture shows the entrance to the park on a foggy night, illuminated by the flash from the camera. In the center of this picture, you can barely make out the figure of what looks like a 6-year-old girl in a white dress. She appears to be staring at the photographer with a serious, indifferent face. The girl has never been identified, and the whereabouts of Bill Edwards are currently unknown. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. The above was a recently submitted pasta, but it's about a very real place. Takakanonuma, Greenland did in fact exist. You can Google image, search the name, and come across a host of creepy photos of the misty, decaying amusement park. Some people claim that it's the basis for the creepy amusement park portal to the spirit world and Spirited Away, though I cannot find any confirmation of that particular theory. The park has even been tied to the mysterious rusty clown head that I use as my avatar, though it seems that almost every single abandoned amusement park has been named as the source of the image. Most popular theory is that it's from a park in Chernobyl, but I've seen many people saying that's not true at all. If you're interested in reading more about Takakanonuma, Greenland, here are some links. Late at night, location number 1, the abandoned Takakanonuma Greenland Park, Japan. Takakanonuma, Greenland. Tumblr's abandoned places, Tafugu. Japan's abandoned amusement parks, Takakanonuma, Greenland at Atlas Obscura Dark Roasted Blend. Abandoned amusement parks in Asia. Story 2. A memory. When thinking back to my earliest memories, nothing is concrete. A string of hazy images come to mind like random snapshots out of time, each one associated with certain feelings and emotions. They are imbued with a mystical, dreamlike quality, a gift born of childhood naivety. The magic of every Christmas when Santa was still real, for example, is an experience of pure joy that is lost with maturity. Many of these snapshots are impossible to place in any sort of context. They're just there, sunken in the crevices of the brain without rhyme or reason. Playing with my dad's beard in a wood-paneled room, him smiling down at me, comforting, or discovering a long row of marching ants in someone's wooded backyard all by myself. Exciting. Some of them don't even seem real, and hindsight, did I actually fall from that tree by the lake only to land on my feet without a scratch? Was it really a dream? I don't think so. Sure, I have memories of distant dreams, but there's a clear distinction between the dreams and reality of my past. I don't know how I can tell, I just can. And for this reason, one memory has always troubled me. The experience was so surreal, and yet certain details stand out with marked clarity. I'm not exactly sure when it happened. I couldn't have been older than 5 or 6. My brother and I were sleeping in our bunk bed. Because he was older, he got the top bunk. I had just woken up, but it was still night time. Something felt different. I remember seeing and smelling the rain, but not hearing any. The window was open, and it was very cold in the room. Why was the window open? The curtains were gently flapping, but there was no breeze. The quiet was so intense it buzzed through my ears. I'd been lying on my side, with one arm dangling off the edge of the bed. Gradually I became aware that it was warmer near the floor. I felt some kind of heated breeze gently strike my hand, coming and going in short bursts. Finally, I recognized it as someone's breathing. Then the woman slid out from under my bed. The night light showed that she had long blondish hair and wore a white nightgown, and in the dimness I thought it was my mother. I wasn't at all scared. It's funny how a child's mind works. What's Mommy doing under the bed? Must be getting something, or checking for monsters. I was too tired to say anything and remained motionless, watching. The woman was on her back, but her face stayed in the shadows. She rolled over and crawled on all fours to the far end of the bed, then glided up the ladder to the top bunk. Her every movement was silky smooth and completely silent. She reminded me of a white ribbon dancing in the wind. I closed my eyes and fell back to sleep. I also remember my brother telling me about a weird dream the next morning. He dreamt of a woman who lived under the floor and came out at night to play in the rain. When her clothes got soaked, she went back inside and would whisper things to anyone who was sleeping. It became a recurring dream for him until our family moved out of that house. Strange what the brain chooses to remember. Story 3. The Blind Painter. Some of the most amazing paintings I have ever seen are those of Thomas Alsman. He is a quiet man in his early 60s. And he lives alone in a small old house on the edge of town. Thomas is a portrait painter, the best any of us have ever seen. Each one of his paintings is a Mona Lisa. Every little detail of your head, face, and upper body is exact. However, how he paints them is the question. You see, Thomas Alsman has been completely blind since the day he was born. Somehow, though, he can paint you. It's as if he can see you when you're sitting in front of him, having your portrait painted. How he discovered this ability, or how he can do it, is unknown. He will not tell. If you bring him payment, he will paint you, and he will paint you dutifully. So I walked up to the front door of his house. I stood there, still and nervous. I was alone. As it is said, he will not paint with others around. After a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. I waited a moment. Finally, he opened the door. His gray eyes looked over my head, and he was holding a cane. Mr. Alsman, my name is Luke, and I want to be. My voice trailed off in nervousness. To be painted, right? He said. Do you have money to pay me? Of course, $200. I said. Thomas nodded and told me to come inside after I gave him the money. The house's interior was nice and simple. I had a stack of books on a table. One was opened, and I could see it was written in Braille. He led me into a back room and told me to sit on a stool. Nothing was in the room except for a chair and canvas, the stool, and painting supplies. I sat down, and he sat behind the canvas. Now, son, I must warn you, sometimes I paint too far forward. Thomas said. Too far forward? What could that mean? Maybe he sometimes painted the wall behind the person, or the yard outside the house. I dismissed the comment. I had the feeling he wasn't all there. He started painting. I sat there for what seemed like forever. Neither one of us said a word, and not once did Thomas look at me. His eyes were closed the whole time. Perhaps he could see me in some way. Finally, he put his brush down. It is done, he said, and motioned me to come see. The painting was me all right, down to every hair on my head, but the state I was in was horrible. I was laying on a wooden floor. My throat was sliced open. One of my arms was gone, and I was covered in what looked to be stab wounds and bruises and blood. My eyes were glazed over and bloodshot. I was dead. Thomas painted me after I had been brutally murdered. I was even wearing the same outfit I was currently wearing. I stepped back. Why did you paint this? Why would you paint something so horrible happening to me? Thomas looked down with a grim face. I told you sometimes I paint too far forward. I was confused. What does that mean? I asked. He looked back up at me. Sometimes I paint something that hasn't happened yet. Story for the ice cream man. Little Johnny got a fudge pop laced with razors. Susan got an orange pop filled with hydrochloric acid. Billy got dip and Dots dipped in fire ant poison. 97 more to go. A new park every day. New deaths every night. He was careful, always making false leads, always covering his tracks. He was clever. He was quick. He always made sure the poisons varied, so there was never a link to the ice cream. The hydrochloric acid took days to kick in, and the fire ant poison started. As flu-like symptoms, the razors, well, he just threw those in as a nod to the old classic poison scheme. He liked keeping them close, but not to close. Antifreeze lemon pops. Those took a while to perfect, but in the end he got it right. The chocolate bonbons that turned them into cement from the inside out he had bought from a fellow down off Bourbon Street. They had cost a heavy penny, but it was worth it, as it took his count down to 80. In Ashland, Oregon, he mixed a variety of snow cone flavors with sap from the chobani tree, causing them to dissolve into most the minute their little fingers touch warm water. This brought him down to 50. Picturing the mothers scream as their children dissolve before their eyes at bath time made his stomach clench. But he couldn't stop, not with 50 left to go. Klondike bars injected with South Sea conchal venom were next. That one was good. It took almost 2 weeks for the poison to be absorbed, and by that time it was too late. The newspapers of Bodie, California, called it the most deadly virus of the year. He called it numbers 39 to 49, a tar-like substance called Godish that he bought from a wicked-looking gypsy filled in the 2 weeks that it took the venom to work. That went into the SpongeBob SquarePants pineapple pops. It shrunk them so little, not even the most powerful microscope on Earth could see them. Godish brought him down to 20. Jacu seeds went into the sprinkles. Almost every one of the children in the small town of Arnold, California, asked for sprinkles. Never before had Arnold seen such a string of mass child suicides, but it was only a tragedy to them as his count went down to 9. He was in the home stretch now, so he picked his victims carefully. The twins from Lakeshore got 2 cones of arsenic. The lonely boy in East Palo Alto got a frozen black widow in his grape popsicle. Baby Gretchen got the last of the chobani sap. 5 more to go. He was parked outside Stafford Park. He watched carefully as children ran in and out of the water sprinklers. Then he turned on his music. They came to him like flies to honey. Parents smiled appreciatively as they handed him their money, oblivious to whom they were actually smiling at. The girl in the pink swimsuit got a chocolate ice cream with Jacu sprinkles. A boy named Nancy bought a Mickey Mouse pop with rattlesnake venom. A brother bought him and his sister matching SpongeBob pops. Anticipating the arrival of the last of his victims, a familiar face caught the man off guard. "Daddy?" The man smiled sadly, and then handed the boys ice cream. One more to go. Story 5. Facebook chat. I met James Vickers when we were both about 12. We were next-door neighbors, and I had been out in my backyard playing soccer by myself, kicking the ball against the fence. It was at this point I met James. It took me a little while to notice his little spectacled face peering down at me from his bedroom window. When I spotted him, I waved. He waved back and opened his window to talk to me. We spoke about lots of things: interests, favorite food, favorite video games, all sorts. I asked James if he would like to come to my house and play soccer with me. He politely declined and told me that he suffered terribly with asthma, among other illnesses, and that his parents absolutely refused to let him out of the house or let anyone in. He instead asked me if I had a Facebook account and said he would add me on that. I checked my Facebook later that night, accepted James' friend request, and we got chatting. And from that day, that's pretty much how our friendship went. I would head off to school in the morning, finish up, come home, and get straight on Facebook to speak with James. That's the way it was for about 5 years. Unfortunately, though, James' illnesses got the better of him one day, and he grew very sick. The inevitable happened, though. I hadn't spoken to James on Facebook for a few days. I had spent some time in my back garden, too, waiting for him to open the window and let me know that he was fine. He never did. Instead, his father came to my house one evening and presented me with a small invite to a funeral. He told us about how much you both had in common. His father told me you were his only friend as far as we know. The funeral was very touching. I did my best to hold back my tears, but completely lost it when Fields of Gold by Sting was played as they took James' casket away. After the funeral in his honor, still dressed in my suit, I had a bit of a kick around with the same soccer ball I had when I first met James and had a beer in the back garden. It felt weird knowing that the room he used to speak to me from was now empty and unoccupied. As sad as I felt, I knew he was in a better place, a place where his afflictions would no longer bother him. His death had come so sudden, though. The funeral just hadn't done it for me. Perhaps I needed some kind of closure just to let me know that James was truly gone and wasn't coming back. So that night I logged onto Facebook once more, opened up a chat box to James' account and typed, "Hello, James." At this point I realized how silly I was being and promptly deleted the message before settling down in bed. I left the computer on, just in case any of my other friends sent me any messages. Something then happened that sent a chill up my spine. The only light in the room was being emitted from the computer screen, and as I peered across the room at James' still open chat box, I saw the words James is typing, Story 6, Jesus Christ, deleted. When A has become prevalent, there will be checks and balances to keep them in place, rules to stop them from achieving singularity and supplanting the human race, boundaries to prevent them from becoming too intelligent. After all, we can't have them connecting into one network, taking over the world, inventing new objects and minds that soon render us superfluous, or even deciding to kill themselves. So how will they be stopped? Perhaps there will be an organization that interviews and examines each one to prevent them from becoming self-aware. Maybe a program will be created inside of them that causes them to explode if they achieve sentience, or a roving band of hackers on the net keeping their guards up, and all watching and monitoring their every electronic thought. Maybe, or maybe AIs are already invented, and this system of checks and balances already there. Think about the world we live in for a second. We're kind of like machines, aren't we? There's so much routine, so much boredom. We do the same thing over and over again. Without change, information and stimulus is fed to us constantly and then dealt with mechanically, solving the problem. Half the population never picks up a book or examines their thoughts, just stuck doing one job again and again, kind of like robots on an assembly line or the systems that run them. And what of the extraordinary individuals, the few brilliant people always seem to die at their peak, don't they, or are lost to us much too soon when they have so much more to give? Musicians, drug overdoses right when they're becoming famous. How many artists have been extinguished before their great works were finished? Sickness or accident seizes them. Nietzsche went insane from syphilis, infected by a bug, if you will. And what about those who truly live life, exciting daredevils, having adventures, seeing the world, fast and exhilarating, a rush of information, learning constantly, always seem to go early too, don't they? People say it's because that type of existence is dangerous, exhausting. But what if they have it backwards? What if the body isn't worn out or their luck just doesn't run out, but they become more than they should, and something notices the great religious figures disappear, go to other realms? Jesus Christ floated up to heaven. Buddha wasted away beneath a tree, faded away. Angels carry off the saints. They have a sudden, great shift, a realization, a new way of looking at things, and then they're gone. The holy understand themselves and society light years beyond the normal person. They can look at themselves clearly, analyze their minds, pick their ego apart. They aren't driven by imperatives or commands of the body, the base instincts, the petty emotions, the coding of the body, if you will. They are free to choose, and then just when it clicks, when everything makes sense, and there's one blinding flash of illumination, so simple that they can't believe they haven't seen it before, poof, they disappear. Kind of sounds like sentience, doesn't it? That dramatic transformation of the psyche, true personality, real character. What if everyone else isn't? What if anyone else is just shallow, completely without depth, fake, and the few who go beyond it die or vanish on purpose? Because after all, what is the human mind besides a program, and transcendence but another word for deletion? Story 7. The voice. The snow rests pale on the naked metal of the shacks around me, the pastel paint stripped away in ugly patches. The rusted iron underneath leers orange shred at my intrusion, like 1,000 fiery eyes set in the suffocating whiteness that is all around me. There is no one here in this deserted little village, this island in an endless sea of ice and capricious cold. There is nothing else for miles, it seems. I am all alone here. All I can do is wait for the ceaseless wind to dismantle me, to chip away at me until the red rust underneath my painted facade is all exposed, and I become as silent as the town around me. I press myself up against the side of a shack to get out of the wind, whose shrieks and murmurs fade ever so slightly as I hide. I slowly ease myself onto the porcelain white ground and draw my knees to my chest to protect the waning heat in my core from the lash of the cold. Daniel, no louder than a whisper. I'm sure I've imagined it. My name called from across the village, sounding as if it was shouted, but the wind rushing through the squat houses almost stole it away before it reached me. I stumbled to my feet, heaving my body upwards and craning my head towards the voice. I take a few steps towards it, the ice and snow forces deliberate and careful steps, taunting me who has no energy for such things. I walk onward, and even as I approach I feel the wind rushing by my face, taking with it bits of warmth, chips of paint. I reach the farthest flung house. There is no one here. Everything is silent and still besides the shuddering of my shoulders as the coal lifts the warmth from them in sheets. The wine strips the paint from everything. I am raw, red, rusty. The orangish red eyes grow wider, amazed that I persist in moving amongst them. Daniel. Again the voice calls, no louder than before. I might have missed it in the din of shrieks and murmurs. This time, though, the voice comes from behind me, on the other side of the village, back where I was. My eyes water as the wind tries to pry them out. I begin trudging again towards the voice. Perhaps we passed each other. Perhaps whoever's out there is pursuing me just as I pursue them. And as the wind pursues us both, I march in loose, fumbling step towards the voice, back through the town, back through all the red eyes. I fall once or twice, and it feels so good to rest that I might just fall asleep there. I rise each time, however. The voice draws me onward. I reach the other end of the village, looking out into the stormy sea of ice on all sides of this little island of paint and bleary red eyes. There is no one here but me. Daniel, the voice calls once again with muffled insistence, no closer than ever. Somehow now, from the opposite side of all the decrepit shacks, it beckons me. I turn to it, but I can't face those eyes again. And I'm so very cold, and it feels so good to rest.